Thanks very much, and thanks for the very warm hometown welcome. It's always good to be home, and home is just there. And it's great to be back in Brizzy. I now understand why you do have reservations about November. That's seriously awful. I've met a couple of blokes in the lift before, and they've been actively into November. I said to one of them, I presume you've been at it all month, because there's barely any evidence. Of course, I've been at it since 1 November myself. That's a different story. To acknowledge Karen Struthers, my State Ministerial colleague and Minister for Women, Bob Atkinson from the Queensland Coppers. Where are you, Bob? There you go. Just put your hands together for the Queensland Police. At a local level, as a local Member of Parliament, I know what the women and men in blue do when it comes to domestic violence. And this is ugly work, it's difficult work, it's work that has to be done, and they do a terrific job. And if you're copying the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, Bob, as occasionally those of us in politics do, and people don't appreciate your virtues on a day-to-day basis, I think you need to know that the community's right behind you and what you're doing on this important area. The board of Australia's CEO Challenge, Di Jean, Stephen Page, Robert Reid, Deborah Wilson and Trevor Carolyn, Wendy Reid and Natalie Prince, who organised this evening's event, White Ribbon Day Ambassadors, and our 2 challenge finalists, Professor Bill Lovegrove and Paul Scurra. Ladies and gentlemen, and fellow White Ribboners. Someone just mentioned to me that they saw white ribbons writ large across the House of Representatives yesterday. That's true, all members were wearing them as their minds went elsewhere. But I know for a fact, having been a White Ribbon Day ambassador myself for getting on for 10 years, certainly a long stretch of time, that in the early days, hard to get people on board. A few years ago, people were getting interested, and today this has real momentum in our nation and actually beyond our shores as well. It's pretty stark and hard to think about. 20 years ago, White Ribbon Day. How did it come about? 14 young women at university in Canada were brutally murdered by a man. And as a result, men got together, a small group, part of Canada, decided to try and do something about it. And I think little would they believe that 20 years later this has grown into a worldwide movement. From little things, big things do grow. We've seen that with your CEO challenge. 10 years ago, the idea was put forward, I think by my good friend Jim Sawley, the then Lord Mayor of Brisbane, together with others and a team who supported him. And from little things, big things grow. And I see now this sort of avalanche of support from corporate Queensland as you get behind the challenge. And I thank each and every one of you for taking up this important task. You see, the numbers are still horrible. You know them, but let's repeat them. 1 in 5 Australian women will experience sexual violence in their lives. 1 in 3 Australian women will experience other forms of violence in their lives. 1 in 4 Australian children will witness violence either towards their mothers or their stepmothers. Only 1 in 3 Australian women report the violence which has been done to them. These are all horrible figures, each and every one of them. And the reason they are so horrible is this is entirely preventable. Because there's one problem here which needs to be addressed, and that problem has 3 letters, M-E-N, men. My gender, the male gender, is responsible for this problem. Men are responsible for this problem. We shouldn't pussyfoot around it. Blokes are responsible for this problem. Often, boys are responsible for the emergence of this problem. There is a problem, therefore, to be dealt with the male gender. And it's not just here. One of the things I've learned as Foreign Minister of this country, since my career readjustment last year, was how much this is a challenge of all cultures around this human family of ours. Doesn't matter where I go, whether it's in the South Pacific, Melanesia and Papua New Guinea and Fiji, the problems of domestic violence in those cultures are horrendous, and they are still by and large not talked about. You go to Latin America, you go to countries in South Asia and East Asia, the problem is there, alive and well. I was recently at a meeting of the African Union in Addis Ababa, and then listening to a table full of UN officials, one of whom was a woman, when she piped up at the end, of course, the big problem across Africa is violence. There was silence when she mentioned violence, but I'm so glad that she did so. Because what we now seek to do in Australia's name around the world is to make a difference. Through our aid program, women's organisations, whether it's in the South Pacific or elsewhere, are now being funded by us to lift the voice of women, as well as provide practical help in establishing what we have taken for granted in this country for some decades now, domestic violence, crisis centres, etc. And we intend to do more of this in partnership with UN Women. We intend to do more of this in partnership with peak women's organisations around the world. And that's why within the last couple of months I've appointed Australia's first ever ambassador for women and girls. She's not a Queenslander. But our ambassador has a wide mandate on gender inequality in general, but frankly this most horrendous, ugly core of the problem in particular. And so our job is to try and make a difference as this movement of ours, this movement which came to our shores over the last 20 years, grows, flourishes, changes people's lives in this country, and then taking that message to the wider world. That's what we're on about, and it's important that that is the case. Some people think this is a social problem. It is. It's simply wrong, and it affects not just women, it affects entire families, entire communities. It is also an economic problem. For those who are hard of heart, if anyone's here from the accounting profession, let me simply pass on to you some stats from KPMG. KPMG did an analysis of 2009 data about the direct economic cost of violence against women in this country at $13.6 billion in the year 2009. If you look at lost productivity, people not showing at work, the other impacts, kids not fronting at school, etc., the consequences are great. The consequences in terms of our police force, the consequences in terms of our medical services. And so for us, the male gender, we've got to make things different. That's why swearing pledges, that one, is so important. We're drilling it into the male cerebral cortex. And in my intense knowledge now of cardiology, having recently been the other side of a cardiac surgeon's scalpel, the path to the heart is the brain. And let me tell you, swearing this pledge, the whole purpose is to permeate men's souls. And when you say, I swear never to commit, excuse, or remain silent about violence against women, this is my oath, and you say it often enough and in the company of other blokes, it has, over time, an effect. Blokes are notoriously bad at talking about how they feel. Okay? They generally are. Women, you usually have a better set of relationships on that score. Blokes are notoriously bad. That's just my view of life. There you go, summed up in a sentence. And therefore, getting them to cross the emotional threshold of owning that statement is half the battle. Getting them to put the words in their mouth is another half of the battle. And if you'll pardon my mathematics, the third half of the battle is to then have that affect the way they behave. So that when, if they've seen their father beat their mothers, or where they have seen their uncles be absolutely brutal with their cousins, they pause and they think, because someone has told them about that oath. That's really important. But there's another part to the oath which is equally important, which is not just committing an act of violence and swearing never to do so. The second part of the oath is about not being silent when you know that such an act of violence has been committed. The wink and the nudge, the knowing silence among men when they either know or suspect that something's not right at home with their mates, or with their brother, or with their father, or with their son, or with their football club. And it's actually going that next step, which actually is the real revolution in this. Because once you commit not to be silent, frankly, you cease to be passive. You become active. You become an evangelist for change. That's what this is about. From little things, big things grow. So I'm proud of the work that this movement has done. I'm proud of the work that you at this CEO Challenge have done. I'm proud of the vision of that small bunch of guys horrified at what they saw in Canada 20 years ago. I'm proud of the fact that human beings have discovered something deep in their souls which has caused them not to simply say that's just life, but in fact to make a difference. And you folks here tonight, good women and men of Queensland, are making that difference here. In our suburbs, in our schools, in our sporting clubs. And for that,